Professor Mev stood before the assembled students in the Grand Medical Academy of the Galactic Union. His blue-tinted skin rippled with excitement as he addressed the class. Today marks a historic occasion. For the first time, our exchange program includes a representative from Earth, a death world. A murmur swept through the amphitheater. The term death world carried weight among the species of the Galactic Union. It referred to planets with extreme conditions that produced hardy, resilient species. Among the gathered alien students, Trill with their delicate, crystalline exoskeletons, gaseous Voon contained in mobility suits, photosynthetic La whose leaves shimmered under the academy lights, sat Ren, the human exchange student. Ren tried to ignore the stares. At 175 centimeters tall with dark hair and tan skin, she appeared unremarkable by human standards. But to her classmates, she was an oddity, a creature from a planet of crushing gravity, extreme temperature variations, and aggressive microbes. The next rotation will focus on emergency medical responses across species, continued Professor Mev. You'll work in mixed teams, combining techniques from your respective worlds. After class, Ren approached her assigned team. Pol, a six-limbed, Brack whose chitinous exoskeleton clicked as he moved, Lumi, a translucent Aqualian who flowed more than walked, and Dex, a furry Minori with large reflective eyes. I'm looking forward to working with you all, Ren said, extending her hand in greeting. The three aliens regarded her cautiously. We've studied your species, Dex said, keeping a respectful distance. Is it true humans can survive significant blood loss and continue functioning? Ren smiled. We're resilient, yes, but we're not invincible. Your planet's gravity is 1.5 times the Union standard. Pol clicked nervously. Your bones must be like steel. And your immune system, added Lumi, voice rippling like water. You coexist with millions of microorganisms inside your body, Ren. Had expected this reaction. As the lone representative of Earth, she carried the responsibility of representing her species. The Union had only recently discovered Earth, and humans remained objects of fascination and trepidation. I hope we can learn from each other, she said diplomatically. Later that evening, Ren messaged her mentor, Dr. Kai, back on Earth. It's exactly as you warned, she wrote. They see us as indestructible monsters from a nightmare world. How am I supposed to integrate when they're terrified of me? Dr. Kai's response came quickly. Show them humanity's true strength isn't our physical resilience. It's our adaptability and compassion. You're not there just to learn, but to teach. The next morning, Professor Mev announced the first practical exercise, emergency response to a pressure breach on a starship. Each team would demonstrate their approach. Remember, Mev cautioned, different physiologies require different interventions. What saves one species might harm another. Ren noticed her teammates exchanging nervous glances. What's wrong? She asked. Vacuum exposure, whispered Dex. For Minori, even seconds of exposure causes catastrophic cellular rupture. Aqualians crystallize instantly, added Lumi, her fluid form rippling with anxiety. Ren nodded thoughtfully. On Earth, vacuum exposure was deadly too, but humans had developed emergency protocols. Let's integrate our approaches, she suggested. We'll create a response protocol that protects everyone's vulnerabilities. As the teams dispersed to prepare, Ren didn't notice Professor Mev watching her with interest. The real test, he knew, was yet to come. The simulation wouldn't feature a simple pressure breach. It would test how these diverse species responded to genuine crisis. And he was particularly curious to see how the Deathworlder would react when things went catastrophically wrong. The simulation chamber was designed to mimic various environments across the galaxy. Today, it had been configured as the medical bay of a mid-sized exploratory vessel. Holograms projected stars visible through reinforced viewports, and the soft hum of ship engines provided background ambience. Each team will face a unique emergency scenario, Professor Mev explained. You'll be evaluated on response time, procedure, appropriateness, and patient outcomes. Ren's team was scheduled third. They watched as the first two teams navigated relatively straightforward emergencies. a coolant leak that caused respiratory distress in a Voon crew member, and a gravitational malfunction that fractured the exoskeleton of a Trill engineer. Team 3, prepare to enter, announced the simulation coordinator. Wren and her teammates donned the standard emergency responder vests and entered the chamber. The simulated medical bay appeared calm at first, with holographic crew members going about routine tasks. Emergency scenario commencing in 3, 2, 1. A deafening blast rocked the chamber. The viewports cracked. Simulation effects, but startlingly realistic. Alarms blared as atmospheric pressure began to drop. Several holographic crew members disappeared, representing those immediately lost to space. Others collapsed with various injuries, multiple casualties. Paul clicked rapidly, his natural fight-or-flight response triggering. "Breach in Sector 4!" "Emergency force fields failing," added Lumi, flowing toward the environmental controls. "We have minutes before total." Decompression. Dex froze, his fur standing on end, a Minori stress response. "This isn't the standard simulation. This is a catastrophic failure scenario." Wren's training kicked in. On Earth, disaster response prioritized triage and resource management. "Dex, seal the bulkhead doors. Paul, identify critical patients. Lumi, stabilize life support." As her teammates moved to their tasks, Wren approached the most severely injured victim, a Brack engineer with a metal shard impaled through his thoracic cavity. Purple fluid leaked around the wound. Brack hemolymph, Wren recalled from her xenobiology studies. She reached for the emergency medical kit, but found it damaged in the blast. "Paul, I need guidance on Brack physiology. This one's critical." Paul rushed over, clicking in distress. "The shard has punctured his secondary heart chamber. Without a molecular sealer, he'll exsanguinate in minutes." Wren surveyed the available supplies. Nothing suitable for Brack physiology. Without thinking, she removed her uniform jacket. "What are you doing?" gasped Paul. "Improvising," Wren replied, tearing the jacket into strips. "On Earth, we call this a pressure bandage." She carefully packed the material around the shard, creating a tight seal that slowed the hemolymph loss. "I won't remove the impaled object. That applies across most species. It's currently plugging the wound." Dex returned from sealing the bulkheads. "Life support is critical, but holding. We have 12 minutes of breathable atmosphere." "That's our window," Wren said decisively. "Lumi, can you interface with the communication systems? We need to coordinate evacuation." As the team worked frantically to stabilize the wounded and prepare for evacuation, Professor Mev and the other instructors observed from the control room. "The human is using primitive techniques," noted one instructor. "Yet effective," countered Mev. "Watch how the others are responding to her leadership." Indeed, the team had fallen into an efficient rhythm, with Wren's decisive action breaking through their initial panic. The real test, however, was just beginning. The simulation intensified as toxic gases began venting through damaged filtration systems. The holographic projection of the ship's status showed multiple failing systems, creating cascading emergencies beyond the initial breach. "Atmospheric contamination detected," announced Lumi, her translucent form swirling with distress patterns. "The ship's computer identifies it as necrotic compound B15. Dex's large eyes widened further. B15 causes immediate respiratory paralysis in Minori physiology. Wren processed this information rapidly. "Dex, use my emergency respirator. It won't fit perfectly, but it should filter the toxins." "But you'll be exposed," Paul objected, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Humans have more respiratory resilience than Minori," Wren explained, already removing her emergency breathing apparatus and adjusting it for Dex's different facial structure. "I can hold my breath longer and recover from limited exposure." As Dex fitted the modified respirator, Wren turned her attention to two new patients. An unconscious Aqualian with rapidly crystallizing extremities and a Trill whose exoskeleton showed fracture patterns. "Lumi, I need information. How do we prevent crystallization in Aqualian tissues?" Lumi moved closer to her injured kinsman. "We need to maintain hydration and increase ambient humidity. Without accessible medical equipment, Ren scanned the damaged bay for alternatives. She spotted the remains of a climate control panel. Paul, can you reconfigure that humidity regulator to create a localized vapor field? While Paul worked on the technical solution, Ren moved to the injured Trill. The crystalline being's normally iridescent exoskeleton had dulled, with concerning fracture lines spreading across its surface. The structural integrity is failing, Ren observed. We need a stabilizing compound. She recalled her xenobiology lessons. Trill exoskeletons were silicon-based and responded well to certain adhesive compounds. Ren searched the debris and located a container of industrial sealant. This contains similar molecular structures to Trill regenerative fluids, she explained to her increasingly astonished teammates. Not ideal, but it should prevent further fracturing until proper medical treatment. She carefully applied the makeshift treatment, using techniques adapted from Earth's emergency orthopedic protocols. The ship's computer voice interrupted. Warning, structural integrity at 20%. Estimated time to complete failure, 7 minutes. We need evacuation pods, Ren decided. Can we move the patients? Paul finished the humidity regulator, which now enveloped the Aqualian in a protective mist. The Brack and Aqualian are too unstable to move conventionally. Ren nodded grimly. Then we'll create impromptu stretchers. Dex, help me disassemble these wall panels. As they worked, the toxin levels continued rising despite Ren's efforts to seal the vents with torn fabric. She began coughing violently, her human respiratory system finally succumbing to the contaminated air. Ren, you need medical attention, Lumi observed, noting the human's deteriorating condition. After we evacuate the critical patients. Ren insisted, voice hoarse. The mission parameters are clear, save as many as possible. Professor Mev, still observing from the control room, turned to his colleagues. Notice the human's prioritization matrix. Despite physiological distress, she continues functioning at near-optimal levels. Is this typical for Deathworlders? Asked an assistant professor. The combination of physical resilience and psychological determination is uniquely human, Mevi replied. It's why their inclusion in the medical exchange program is so valuable. They've evolved techniques we would never consider. In the simulation chamber, Ren's team had successfully improvised transport for all patients and was proceeding toward the evacuation point, unaware that the greatest challenge of the simulation was yet to reveal itself. The evacuation route to the escape pods became increasingly hazardous as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. One moment, they were nearly weightless, struggling to control the movement of the makeshift stretchers. The next, they were pressed to the floor under twice standard gravity. Gravitational compensators failing, gasped Paul, his exoskeleton creaking under the strain during a high-gravity surge. Ren's muscles burned with the effort of holding the Brack patient stable during these fluctuations. Earth's higher gravity had prepared her body for this stress better than her teammates, but even she was reaching her limits. We're almost there, she managed through gritted teeth as another wave of gravity pressed down. Suddenly, a support beam crashed across their path, blocking access to the evacuation zone. Behind them, the corridor began to buckle as hull integrity continued to fail. We're trapped, Dex whispered, the panic in his voice evident even through the respirator. Ren assessed the situation with brutal efficiency. The beam was too heavy to move conventionally, especially with the gravitational fluctuations. Time was critical. The ship's computer had announced only 5 minutes remaining before catastrophic failure. A new plan, she announced. Lumi, can you flow through small spaces in your natural state? The Aqualian rippled affirmatively. Yes, but I cannot transport solid matter through compression spaces. You'll go ahead and prepare the escape pods, Ren directed. Dex, your smaller size means you can squeeze through that gap near the floor. Help Lumi. What about you and Paul? Asked Dex, already moving toward the opening. Ren looked at the massive beam, then at her remaining teammate. We're going to create a new path. Once Lumi and Dex had gone ahead with instructions to prepare the evacuation pods, Ren turned to Paul and the patients still needing transport. On Earth, Humans developed techniques for leveraging mechanical advantage in emergency situations, she explained, searching the debris for a metal rod. Finding one, she wedged it under the edge of the fallen beam. This is a simple machine called a lever. With sufficient force at the correct point, even a single human can move objects many times their weight. Paul watched in astonishment as Ren positioned herself for maximum leverage. But even with this lever, the mass exceeds safe lifting parameters. That's where human physiology becomes relevant, Ren said, bracing herself. In extreme situations, our bodies can temporarily exceed normal limitations. With a primal grunt that startled Paul, Ren pushed down on the lever with every ounce of strength her Deathworld-evolved body could muster. The beam shifted slightly, creating a small gap. "Now!" she gasped, face contorted with effort. Paul quickly helped maneuver the patients through the opening. The ship lurched again, and Ren felt something tear in her shoulder as she maintained the position. "Hurry!" she urged, pain evident in her voice. Once the patients were through, Paul slipped past. The gravity fluctuated again, momentarily lightening the load, and Ren seized the opportunity to dive through the gap herself just as the beam crashed back down. In the observation room, Professor Mev's team watched in stunned silence. She just exceeded the calculated strength parameters for her species by 40%, one technician noted incredulously. "Adrenaline response," Mev explained. "Humans can temporarily bypass their normal physical limitations in crisis situations. Their endocrine system floods their body with compounds that enhance strength and suppress pain." "Is that not dangerous to their long-term health?" asked another observer. "Extremely," confirmed Mev, "which makes their willingness to endure such risks for others all the more remarkable." Back in the simulation, Ren's team had finally reached the evacuation pods, but their ordeal was far from over. The evacuation bay was in chaos. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow across the damaged compartment, and warning klaxons blared incessantly. Lumi and Dex had prepared 2 escape pods, but a critical problem remained. "The pods are designed for standard Union physiologies," Dex explained urgently. "The life support systems aren't calibrated for our diverse group, especially the injured." Ren surveyed the pod's control panels, her injured shoulder sending waves of pain with each movement. The standard Union pods maintained atmospheric compositions optimal for the most common species, but potentially lethal for others. "We need to reconfigure the environmental controls," she decided. "Lumi, can you interface directly with the pod systems?" The Aqualian's fluid form rippled uncertainly. "I can connect to the basic functions, but the medical subsystems require authentication we don't have." Ren's mind raced through options. On Earth, emergency protocols often required technological improvisation, bypassing safety measures when the alternative was certain death. "Then we override them," she stated, dropping to her knees beside the first pod's access panel. "Paul, I need your mechanical strength to remove this housing." As Paul worked to expose the pod's systems, Ren turned to their patients. The Brack engineer's condition had stabilized with her makeshift pressure bandage, but the Aqualian was beginning to crystallize again without the humidity field, and the Trill's exoskeleton continued to deteriorate. 3 minutes to structural. "Failure," announced the ship's computer with unsettling calm. With the access panel removed, Ren examined the life support circuitry. The system was unfamiliar, but the principles remained constant across technologies. Input, processing, output. "I need to cross-wire the environmental sensors," she muttered. "Dex, your claws are perfect for this precision work, under Ren's direction." Dex manipulated the delicate components. She guided him through a series of modifications that would allow manual control of each pod's atmosphere. "This violates multiple safety protocols," Paul clicked nervously. "Safety protocols assume standard conditions," Ren countered, wiping sweat from her brow. "Our situation is anything but standard." With the modifications complete, they carefully transferred the patients into the first pod. Ren programmed specific atmospheric parameters for each occupant's section. "Lumi, you'll need to maintain a moisture barrier around the injured Aqualian during transit," she instructed. Paul, monitor the Brack's hemolymph pressure and adjust the compression bandage as needed. What about you? Asked Dex, his large eyes reflecting concern. Wren checked the ship's deteriorating status on a nearby display. I'll pilot the second pod with the Trill patient. The pods need to launch simultaneously, or the bay doors won't cycle correctly. In the observation room, Professor Mev leaned forward intently. She's delegating based on optimized physiological matches, he noted. And the technical override of the pod systems. Our curriculum doesn't cover such modifications. It's reckless, objected another instructor. It's adaptive, countered Mev. The human is improvising solutions beyond our standardized protocols. Back in the simulation, Wren secured herself in the second pod's pilot seat, trying to ignore the throbbing pain in her shoulder and the burning in her lungs from toxin exposure. A final launch sequence initiated, she confirmed over the interpod communication system. Synchronizing countdown, 3, 2, 1. The pods lurched free just as the ship behind them began to break apart, the simulation creating a spectacularly realistic view of the vessel's destruction through the rear viewports. But their ordeal wasn't over. The shockwave from the exploding ship sent both pods tumbling into the debris field, setting off a new series of alarms. The escape pod bucked violently as it careened through the debris field. Warning indicators flashed across the control panel, signaling multiple system stresses. Behind them, the simulated explosion of the vessel continued to propel dangerous fragments in all directions. Despite the chaotic motion, Wren kept her focus on the navigation controls. Her Earth training had included scenarios for unstable atmospheric flight, principles that translated surprisingly well to space emergency evasion. Pod 2, adjust your vector by 20 degrees, she instructed over the comlink to the pod carrying Pol, Lumi, and Dex. Use the debris dispersion pattern to shield your approach to the rally point. Through the viewport, she could see the other pod executing a series of precise maneuvers, narrowly avoiding collision with a massive section of hull plating. Inside, her own pod, the injured Trill's condition was deteriorating. The improvised exoskeleton sealant was failing under the stress of their violent trajectory changes. I need to stabilize you better, Wren muttered, engaging the autopilot for a dangerous few moments. She removed her remaining undershirt, tearing it into strips to create a more comprehensive binding for the crystalline being. The cold air of the pod bit at her exposed skin, but she ignored the discomfort, focusing entirely on the medical task. In Earth emergency medicine, we call this a full-body splint, she explained to the semi-conscious Trill as she worked. The principle is to prevent movement that could exacerbate fractures. A particularly violent impact rocked the pod, throwing Wren against the bulkhead. Fresh pain exploded from her injured shoulder, and she tasted blood where she'd bitten her cheek. Forcing herself back to the controls, she corrected their course. Pod 1, report status, she called, trying to keep the strain from her voice. Lumi's fluid tones responded. Stability maintaining at 60%. The Brack patient shows signs of hemolymph pressure stabilization, but our Aqualian requires constant humidity modulation. Navigate to these coordinates, Wren transmitted a series of numbers. It's the emergency rendezvous point from the ship's database. In the monitoring room, Professor Mev's team watched with professional interest. The human continues to function despite injuries that would incapacitate most species, noted a medical specialist. And her knowledge integration is remarkable, adapting Earth techniques to alien physiologies. More importantly, added Mev, observe how she's united the team. Each member is contributing according to their unique abilities under her coordination. On the primary monitor, they watched as both pods approached the designated rendezvous coordinates, a simulated space station that appeared as a bright point against the starfield. Station Gamma, this is Medical Emergency Pod 1, requesting immediate docking and medical assistance, Wren transmitted. We have multiple species with critical injuries requiring specialized treatment. The simulation responded with appropriate station protocols, guiding the pods to emergency docking bays. As they approached the final approach vectors, however, Pod 1 suddenly lost propulsion. Pod 1 report, Wren called urgently. Primary propulsion failure, Pol's clicking came through the comm. Reserve thrusters at minimal capacity, insufficient for docking procedures. Wren quickly assessed the options. Without propulsion, Pod 1 would drift past the station, and its occupants' conditions would become critical before another rescue. Could be mounted. I'm coming to assist, she decided instantly. Prepare for emergency pod-to-pod coupling. That procedure has never been successfully executed outside of theoretical simulations, objected Paul. Then we'll make history, Wren replied grimly, already adjusting her pod's course. She maneuvered her pod alongside the drifting vessel, matching its tumble with precision born of intense concentration. Using the emergency maneuvering thrusters, in short, calculated bursts, she brought the two pods into alignment. Prepare for impact, she warned, then executed a final burn that brought the docking rings together with a jarring clash of metal. The magnetic seals engaged automatically, linking the pods into an unwieldy but functional combined craft. Using her pod's still operational propulsion system, Wren carefully guided them toward the waiting station. Approach vector locked, she announced, voice steady despite her racing heart. Docking in 30 seconds. The debriefing chamber hummed with excited conversation as students from all species gathered to review the simulation exercise. Professor Mev stood at the central podium, holographic replays of each team's performance projected on the surrounding screens. When Wren's team's simulation appeared, a hush fell over the assembly. Team 3 faced what was objectively the most challenging scenario, Professor Mev began. Multiple critical injuries across diverse physiologies, catastrophic ship, failure, and emergency evacuation complications. Their performance warrants detailed analysis. The holographic display showed key moments: Wren's improvised pressure bandage for the BRAC patient, the humidity field for the Aqualian, the industrial sealant application for the Trill's exoskeleton, and finally, the unprecedented pod-to-pod coupling maneuver. The human delegate demonstrated techniques unknown to our standard protocols, continued Mev. While some might characterize these methods as primitive or makeshift, their effectiveness cannot be disputed. Wren sat quietly, her shoulder now properly treated by the Academy's medical staff. Around her, her teammates appeared somewhat uncomfortable with the attention, but undeniably proud of their accomplishment. I propose, said Mev, that we have much to learn from Deathworld medicine. The conditions of Earth have produced not only physically resilient beings, but also remarkably adaptable problem-solving approaches. A Voon professor floated forward, their gaseous forms swirling thoughtfully within their containment suit. The ethical implications must be considered. Some of these techniques involve significant risk to the practitioner. A valid concern, agreed Mev. Yet consider the philosophical dimension. The willingness to accept personal risk to benefit others represents a moral framework worth studying. After the formal debriefing, students gathered in smaller groups. Wren found herself surrounded by curious classmates from across the galactic spectrum. Is it true you gave your breathing apparatus to Dex despite the toxins? Asked a Trill student, crystalline structure glittering with interest. Human lungs have certain filtering capabilities, Wren explained modestly. It was a calculated risk. And the lever technique for moving objects beyond normal strength parameters? Inquired a BRAC medical student. Simple physics, Wren smiled. Sometimes ancient principles are the most reliable. Later, in the Academy's botanical garden, designed to accommodate the environmental preferences of all species, Wren met with her team. The setting sun cast an amber glow across the diverse flora, creating a peaceful atmosphere after their harrowing simulation. I've been authorized to include Earth emergency medical techniques in our curriculum, Paul informed her, mandibles clicking with what she now recognized as excitement. Your improvisation protocols will become standard teaching. Lumi flowed, closer, her translucent form catching the light. The Academy Council is discussing a permanent exchange program with Earth medical institutions. They called your methods brutally effective, added Dex with newfound admiration. High praise from the Council. Wren smiled, thinking about her message to Dr. Kai later. Earth's integration into the Galactic Union had begun with suspicion and fear. The Deathworlders, with their hardy physiology and aggressive immune systems, were seen as potential threats rather than allies. What we consider ordinary emergency medicine on Earth seems revolutionary here, she observed. But there's so much I've learned from all of you as well. Professor Mev approached their group, his blue skin catching the evening light. The true strength of the Galactic Union has always been diversity, he said. Different evolutionary paths creating unique approaches to universal challenges. He turned specifically to Ren. Your species' capacity to function under extreme duress, to improvise with limited resources, and to prioritize others despite personal risk. These are valuable contributions to our collective knowledge. We're simply products of our world, Ren replied. Earth shaped us to be adaptable. Perhaps, Mev acknowledged, but there is something more. Many species evolve resilience. Fewer develop the instinct to extend that resilience to protect others, unlike themselves. As twilight descended on the Academy, Ren reflected on her role as Earth's representative. The fear and suspicion she'd encountered upon arrival had transformed into curiosity and respect. Humans weren't just Deathworlders anymore. They were innovators, problem solvers, and, most importantly, healers. The stars began to appear overhead, the same stars visible from Earth, yet now representing not distant mystery, but a community to which humanity had finally been welcomed, not despite their Deathworld origins, but because of the unique perspective those origins provided. In the garden's peaceful atmosphere, representatives of a dozen worlds conversed, shared knowledge, and built connections, the true medicine that healed the wounds of isolation and misunderstanding across the vast reaches of space.